From the 6th hour until the 9th hour, darkness came over all the land. About the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" As we try to come to terms with the deadly coronavirus, we are distressed by the mental picture of its victims struggling to draw air into their lungs. A person nailed on a cross has his chest constricted by his whole weight pulling down on it. Each gasp for breath is able to be snatched only by forcing down his wounded limbs onto the iron nails, piercing them and pinning them to the cross. This is what makes crucifixion one of the most painful forms of death. And anyone anticipating such torture might well be in anguish, as Jesus was that night in the Garden of Gethsemane, and might sweat great drops of blood. Anyone expecting such agony might well pray, "If it is possible, may this cup be taken from me." But it wasn't the expectation of imminent physical agony that was causing Jesus the greatest distress. It was the fact that in just a few hours' time, to quote St. Paul, God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. 2 Corinthians 5, verse 21. The one person who had never rebelled against God, never allowed selfishness or dishonesty or unkindness to have any place in his life, was about to soak up into himself all the sin, evil, hatred, and corruption of the world. The one person who had never been estranged from the perfect Godhead because of any sin in his life was about to be cut off from God the Father. And this was the most painful thing of all. But this was the very reason Jesus Christ came into the world in the first place. And it is in this dreadful cry of dereliction that it happens. From north and south and east and west and across all the ages, all the sinfulness, spite and selfishness of humanity streams into this anguished figure on the cross. Like some perfect, beautiful, natural sponge, Jesus, as he hangs on the cross, soaks up into himself the pride, the greed, the anger, the envy, the bitterness, self-pity, and plain beastliness of the world. Jesus, the one perfect human being, becomes the receptacle of all human wickedness. Yours and mine, and Hitler's, and Pol Pot's, and that of everyone who has ever lived. And his perfect Father, whose eyes, the prophet Habakkuk tells us, are too pure to look on evil, who cannot tolerate wrong, cannot bear to look upon his Son. He turns away from him. God has ruptured himself from himself. And God the Son, who has so identified with struggling humanity himself as to become human, is sentenced to hell on our behalf as our representative. And in that moment of utter separation from the source of all good and beauty and life and love, Jesus becomes hideously aware for the first time of that estrangement. He is so emptied of his oneness with his Father that he no longer even understands the divine purpose behind it all, and so, in this his ultimate agony, he shouts out the very words written prophetically centuries before by King David in Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Alone, abandoned, bearing on his shoulders the guilt of the whole world, the Son of Man and Son of God hangs there for you. The reason it is so easy to obtain salvation, wrote Oswald Chambers, is because it cost God so much. In our place, Jesus accepts the separation from God, which is the otherwise inevitable consequence of our sin and selfishness. And on Easter Sunday, we will celebrate his bursting through death to give us new life. Our response must be to recognize that that sacrifice was made on our behalf and humbly accept it. Thank you, Lord Jesus.